Good afternoon to you. Good afternoon to you. It is 4:06, and we are live from our Kingdom Financial Group studio here at 5th and State, and we're having the crucial conversations that Erie needs, and I'm glad to welcome back to our studios here the former Congressman of our district here in Pennsylvania. It used to be called, I think, the 3rd District. Now it's the 16th District. Congressman Phil English, who is an associate with Arndt Fox Schiff, Senior Government Relations Advisor. Phil, good to see you. Appreciate you being
Joel,
with us.
Joel, you're dating me. I've been around since this was the 21st Congressional District.
Well, we lost that many seats, didn't we?
This is this small bit of trivia, but Pennsylvania has lost more congressional seats because of the census than any other state.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
We have lost half of our seats. And that goes back to the time when they froze the number of members of the House, which was at the beginning of the 20th century. And we have been in decline since then.
I mean, talk about trivia. Is growing the Congress something that you would advocate to have it match more? Maybe instead of congressmen representing what was it? Right now, it's like 750,000 people. Maybe representing 1 million people, but still having it, not so fixed at 435.
I guess if I had a recommendation, my change would be to increase the number of House members. Most people recoil at that, but members who are required to cover so much ground and represent so many people, and just through sheer geography, they are insulated from the voters because there are so many voters, and as a result, it comes down not to grassroots campaigning, but to how much money you can raise and how much money your party is going to throw in. The world has changed since I got into this game. My view is that if districts had fewer people in them, you'd actually have more diversity in the House and you'd have more turnover. But mine is the minority view. When people hear that, they say, well, then we'd have to pay more of them.
Right. Exactly right. Let's talk about your new role. You just got appointed to a new commission. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I got a call out of the blue from a lady called Heather Wilson, who served with me in Congress and is now a college president in the West. And she said, I've been talking to and working with a couple of think tanks, the American Enterprise Institute, where I have friends, and the Brookings Institution, which is one of the most famous ones in Washington, works closely with our friends here at the Jefferson Educational Institute. So she said, we are putting together a commission, several former members, several experts, and a variety of people who have grassroots experience. And we are going to do a 2-year survey with public hearings funded by foundation support to go around the country and talk to rural people and rural institutions and find out what kinds of headwinds are they facing. Because we have seen that rural communities have suffered considerably in the new economy. They have been going backwards. We've seen this in our region. In the areas I've represented, the rural areas have been losing population, losing jobs, losing opportunities. And the whole idea is, can we put together a centrist agenda that is going to reach across ideological and party lines and maybe suggest ways that we can empower local communities in rural settings to specialize in the economy, to be resilient in the face of the world economy, and to adapt to a changing economy which is going to be transformed in a few years by AI.
And I would think that it's not just all about ag, where ag tech is, because when you really talk about rural communities, you're talking about a place like Warren, which is, an energy community.
I used to represent Warren, and they have an extraction economy. They have an old manufacturing economy, which still has some vitality, but has been losing jobs. They have a refinery. They have They have a very interesting and diversified local economy, but they've been losing population because they've been losing jobs. So in a community like Warren, knowing some of the city fathers there, can they come together? And if they have the right tools, and I'm not talking about just federal programming and federal spending, I'm talking about certain flexibilities. Do we need to give a makeover to the education system? What about rural health care, which is right now front and center in the national debates? How do you tie all of that together? Because it's not a single factor. There are a whole bunch of things that go into this. And you're right, rural areas are not agricultural per se. They can have all kinds of local economies, and some of them have long histories and also cultural folkways that are part of their resilience and need to be supported. I'm very excited. The commission has come together, has been rolled out. The co-chairs are going to be Senator Heidi Heitkamp of North Dakota. Our first hearing, which I can't attend as it turns out, is going to be in North Dakota and is also going to visit Native American communities in the region, which have a particular story about how they have adapted and been resilient that has lessons, I think, for Anglo communities and other communities in rural settings. We are going to do, we think, a hearing somewhere in either Kentucky or Pennsylvania that'll be relevant to this region. And then we're going to go around the country. And this is just one more crazy, uncompensated assignment I've taken on. But my firm's very supportive. I'm very excited. And this approaches the economic development equation from so many different directions. And we're going to produce a report. There has been no national strategy proposed for rural areas and the rural economy since the 1970s.
Why do you think that is? I mean, we have the Appalachian, Commission.
The Appalachian Regional Commission, which is a product of the Kennedy era and has had some significant successes, is relevant to some of our local projects. Nobody has focused on areas like this.
I mean, I think about Bobby Kennedy going into Appalachia too and bringing out those stories. I mean, the 60s, we were well aware of all this.
And we did a follow-up in the 70s, and now that since then it's been a gap. We've been talking about some of the challenges of communities like we find in the Rust Belt, for example, Flint, Michigan. I was on the board for years of the Northeast Midwest Institute that did some of the original research that identified Flint's drinking water problem. And coming from that, now that happened before I was on their board, but coming from that perspective, there is a lot of original research that needs to be done here. And American Enterprise Institute and Brookings are two of the, I think, key players, AEI on the center right, Brookings on the center left, that have the potential really to do original research that's actually going to move the needle. And because this is an entirely bipartisan commission, I think it's going to produce some ideas that are going to break the mold. Those ideas are already out there. They've been done in communities around the country, but nobody has brought that experience together. Nobody has taken a look at what works. Again, Joel, this has been kicked around many times over the years. In the 1930s, there were some communities that in the face of the Depression were able to turn themselves around, and others got creamed. I think Western Pennsylvania has an amazing overlay of different communities with different points of origin, some like Greenville, Pennsylvania, which was a transshipment point where the railroads met the canals, and that was the original rationale, and has had manufacturing there up until modern times, and I used to work with some of the manufacturers when I was in Congress. The Shenango Valley, which is where a big part of the American steel industry was modernized before it flowed south into Pittsburgh and then around the country. The Shenango Valley is a good example of a rural area in terms of small river communities next to each other that have had some resilience. And the Winter Company, launched by Jim Winter, a local producing what was it, the car protection.
Yeah, right. The car jack or something like that.
Yeah. Basically, we've had some actual success stories even locally.
Well, I'm thinking about even, where do your ladders come from?
Warner Ladder. Yeah.
Warner Ladder down in that area there.
And Eric Warner is an old friend of mine.
Yeah,
and
wow.
And the bottom line is some of those jobs have been leaving, have been moved elsewhere because of bad economics, but usually not bad workers. And I think we need to come up with some key understandings which will apply to rural areas, but may also apply to other communities, including inner city communities, when it comes to how in the new economy, which is going to be so technology oriented, how can smaller communities, marginalized neighborhoods, communities that are unspecialized, have big problems in their workforce development. How do they get uplift? And are there some things that can be done to bring development and investment back in? And when I say investment, I mean investment in the people, not investment in big corporate settings.
I'm going to go to my break, but I want you to ruminate on this concept of is the workforce the thing that it could be holding back not only rural communities but cities like Erie, smaller cities where our kids don't live around here anymore. For many families that grew up in Erie, that's right. The narrative here. Let's talk about workforce when we come back. Phil English is with us here. Stay with us. It's 418 Talk Erie. It's Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show. We're live with former Congressman Phil English, and we were before the break. We were talking about this new commission that that Mr. English is involved with, and we're talking about rural workforce and things. And I want you to talk about having our young people ready for these jobs of the present and the future, whether they live in rural areas or in an urban setting like we have here in the city. Is there enough conversation going on at the federal level and at the state levels regarding our workforce, Phil?
There's a lot of conversation going on, but a lot of people are talking past each other, and I find that personally frustrating. We have a college debt crisis that I think is very well developed, but what isn't talked about as much is for the next generation, if many of them are looking for alternatives to college, what are those going to be? There are a lot of skill sets, careers that can be developed that don't necessarily track what people are taking at the college level. Now, full disclosure, I'm strongly committed to college. I'm strongly committed to liberal arts. I am a trustee of Mercyhurst. So my view is that there need to be a mix of options. Our local community college, I think, is a good move, one of the best moves that our community has made recently to leverage some state resources in and create some programming that aims specifically at updating and refreshing workforce skills and competences for people. But one of the keys, I think, is to get people working early and also early in their career, give them opportunities and give them incentives. And one of my favorite clients is, I think Joel, I work with a variety of clients, including some higher education clients. And one of the clients I've had from almost the get-go is the Work College Consortium. Work colleges have a particular model that I'm not going to say should be universal, but we're talking about a group of schools that use work-study funds to have students commit to working while they are in college. While they are in college, they have assigned jobs that they can bid in on, but everybody in the school works. And when they get through, they have largely paid their college tuition. So we have a number of these schools that are fairly famous. It's not a huge percentage of the actual schools in the country, but they are successful. They run the gambit from small liberal arts institutions that have a liberal bent to comparatively conservative ones that are located in the Sun Belt. We have one which is predominantly inner city in Texas, but all of them have the common thread that they recognize that people need to start working early in their career, build those skills, build those disciplines, and also ignite their ability to continue to further educate themselves.
It occurs to me that kind of scenario, and you can do work study anywhere. Maybe parents should really encourage their kids. You should be working part-time and burning off some of that debt before it becomes debt. I had to work through college. I worked at the hospital. I mean, that was the norm back in the day. But making sure that you have all kinds of time for fun and frolicking maybe is not the answer. I want to pivot here. Phil English is with us, and let's talk about this current moment. We had the memorial for Charlie Kirk.
Right.
We had a political assassination of one of the up and coming voices in the conservative movement. Some say he was the next generation of the conservative movement, and he was gunned down by a young person. Former President Barack Obama mentioned this at the Jefferson event on Tuesday. This is a fraught moment, in my opinion. What do you think?
I think it is a fraught moment because we've been building up to this now for a number of years. I mean, there were several legislators and ex-legislators who were murdered in Minnesota comparatively recently. They were, as it happens, institutional Democrats. We saw Steve Scalise. There was an attempt on his life that put him in the hospital for many months. That was aimed at the entire Republican conference that was out preparing for a promotional ball game. We have seen growing evidence. The two attempts on Donald Trump's life, one of which was in our neighborhood and was breathtaking. All of those things, I don't think either side has relief from this, and I think both sides have some responsibility, but I'm not going to suggest that this is a question of, one side. I want to make very clear, I think there are some reasons that our politics have been facilitating why things have been breaking down. Our norms are eroding. I think the way the rule of law has been twisted has undercut our faith in a lot of institutions. I also think there are some things going on, including great economic distress for the middle class. The middle class has been sliding. Even post-COVID, as we have seen the wealthy do better, we've seen working families actually continue to see their standard of living erode. And that was a big issue in the last election. And I don't think we've seen, contrary to what some of my friends say, I don't think we've seen a big turnaround in the economy that has found its way into the pocketbooks of the working class. I have a friend, one of my dearest friends in politics, who worked on many of my campaigns in Mercer County. I called her up and I said, this was 2 months ago, how do you think the economy is doing? She is a fierce Republican, and she said, the economy is terrible. And I don't blame the current administration for that. This is something in part they inherited, but I also think we need to recognize that some things are going to need to change if we're going to get the economy moving for everybody again. I know that sounds like a bromide. It's too simple, but we need to think outside of the box, not about new government programs necessarily, although there may be some of that. We can't really afford to be spending giant gobs of money when we have essentially cleaned out our own bank account, in part because of COVID, but a lot of it predated it. What we need to recognize is we need to come up with ways of empowering individuals and communities and give people hope that they can actually move up from their current circumstance, and that for their kids, their kids are going to have opportunity for a better life.
Coming out of despair into some preferred future. We're talking to Phil English here. Got to take a break here at the bottom of the hour. It's Talk Erie. Appreciate you tuning in to Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show, live from our Kingdom Financial Group studio here at 5th and State. Former Congressman Phil English is with us here. We're getting him to weigh in on the matters of the day and related to a new assignment that he's taking on with a steady hand to reach out and study rural America and rural communities here. Congressman English, let's talk about a government shutdown, and you have some experience with this.
Oh, big time.
Talk about your experience.
My experience was that when I was a freshman in Congress, Speaker Gingrich made a horrible miscalculation. He decided to bring on a government shutdown to force the issue with the Clinton administration, which up until that point, the House Republicans, working with their Senate colleagues, were making some progress. But ultimately, Newt made some terrible mistakes. I do not put this all on him, but essentially, I think that government shutdowns have become a game of chicken where the collateral damage is always on the public and is largely unseen, which is why they don't feel that it's a bad thing. Right now, the government shutdown is being driven by a couple of things, and I'm going to be. People know that I'm a Republican, but I also work with Democrats, and I represent a whole range of folks. And let me say that the reason why we're coursing toward a government shutdown is a combination of, on the Democratic side, they want to show some spine against the Republicans and the administration. They're being beaten up by their own grassroots, so they are insisting for a temporary extension, a continuing resolution. They're insisting on a massive extension of subsidies to health insurance companies so that people's insurance will continue to be held down in a COVID-era program. This was not originally part of the Affordable Care Act, but the problem is some of the bills are coming due with the Affordable Care Act, and costs are being pushed up. And so, if you held a gun to my head, do I favor those subsidies? I at least probably favor a continuation of them in the short run. But adults have to realize that the gravy train has to end, and you have to come up with a way of fixing the problem in the health insurance system to actually hold down the costs. And most of the solutions out there are fairly uneven. That's my view. So there's this demand that this one provision, vastly expensive, be extended just to allow the debate to continue on the budget for the next couple of months. I don't think the Republicans are going to go along with that.
No.
However, you also have the problem that Chuck Schumer, who voted, in my view, correctly to allow the Republican continuing resolution to go through months ago. And why was it correct? Because if the government had been shut down at that point, and this will be true again, the Trump administration will have enormous flexibility in how they reconfigure funds. And the savings are going to be very limited, but the Trump administration will have an opportunity to move money around within programs that I think will produce results that the Democrats won't like. So Chuck Schumer is facing potentially AOC or someone else in the primary, and he's up next year. And if he doesn't get this right, having been beaten up a few months ago, I think he feels his seat is at risk. So literally, the New York Senate Democratic primary is playing a major role here. Am I pointing the finger just at Chuck Schumer? No, there are a lot of people involved in this, but that's one of the biggest things. And
I heard a commentary from Ezra Klein saying the only way that the Democrats can stop the authoritarianism that is Donald Trump, again, this is Ezra Klein talking, is by shutting down the government. And I think, to your point, you're just enabling Donald Trump. If you're anti-Trump, you're enabling him to move money as willy-nilly as he wishes, right?
And if you're a Democrat and you have an impulse to say you want to shut down the government and not pass a continuing resolution that's basically similar to what was passed in the Biden years, okay, this is not a major policy change. You need to recognize that you are not only putting powerful tools in the Donald Trump's hands, but you're also creating a real potential that Donald Trump will use the White House and his platform to spin this thing against the Democrats. And right now, the Democrats do not have a figure who can stand up and make the counter arguments. I know some of the Democrats who are aspirants. A couple of them are actually friends of mine. I don't think they should want to shut down the government, but they also are going to listen to their grassroots. So this is a real dilemma. It's actually a real dilemma on both sides, because I'm convinced that a lot of Republicans don't understand the potential damage to their brand if this doesn't play out the way they'd prefer. A government shutdown is a high-risk thing for both parties politically, but it's a high-risk thing for the public. If there's a national emergency or something moves during a government shutdown, that is going to be a terrible problem. And I just don't think we should be playing with dynamite in this case. That is just my view.
Yeah, let's talk about kind of the 30,000-foot view of going beyond the September 30th deadline and really making progress on the national debt. I keep on hearing, from callers, we've got to have Doge because we got to lower, but what you got rid of $9 billion in the rescission bill that has laid waste to WPSU and WQLN. I mean, $9 billion. We spend that kind of money in a couple hours in this federal government. Is that it?
Well,
correct? I mean,
there is merit to that argument. That a lot of the cuts are very limited. That said, this is about more, I think, than just cutting spending. I think that this administration came in, granted, with a chainsaw. To try to reconfigure some programs that hadn't been talked about in a long time. And they've done it and many of them have this background, like a bunch of software entrepreneurs would. A lot of them are tech people. They've come in, they don't understand a lot of the programs that they're tampering with, but they're going in because in a tech company, if you want to do a shakeup, you go in, you make deep cuts, and then you go in and rehire people if you find they're actually necessary. Mm-hmm. That's not the way you handle a federal bureaucracy with strong institutional memory, some of which you need to keep, but which is infuriating to the public because it does not move quickly. Coming up with a way of transforming some of the major departments in our federal government without causing a lot of damage is a challenge which has eluded a number of administrations.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think it was Bill Clinton that wanted to deregulate. I mean, deregulation has been part of everything.
Sure.
And lowering. But I find it interesting that it was Clinton and Gingrich who figured out a way to balance that budget, that federal budget.
That is exactly right, and I can tell you how we did it. People were skeptical. You don't do tax cuts and balance the budget. Well, we did some modest targeted tax cuts. That was the beginning of the child tax credit, and we identified a number of areas where we were ratcheting down the baseline for spending, but we also grew the economy faster. And I think economic growth, Joel, ultimately we're not going to be able to deal successfully with our massive federal debt and deficit unless we lower the deficit so that it is a smaller piece of the pie than our growing economy. As the economy grows, we can generate more revenue. We could do it in some creative ways. We can talk about tax policy, but we need to grow the economy faster than the debt is growing, and then it will shrink in relative terms. That is how the United States dealt with this problem after World War II. That's how the British Empire dealt with it after the Napoleonic Wars when they were flat on their back.
Do you see that the tariffs will get us partially where that is?
Well, you're rubbing my rhubarb because I'm very involved in trade policy, have been for years. And I've been in favor of, for example, when I was in Congress, steel tariffs because they were needed at the time. But they are not an effective or efficient way of generating large amounts of revenue, particularly if they are applied kind of in a unpredictable way. They end up causing, I think, more uncertainty, in some parts of the economy, more damage than they generate revenue. And that's a problem. Because
what about this concept, though, of challenging these multinationals to build more here in the States?
Oh, it's the right thing to do.
Okay.
It is the right. And let me say, I think Trump has that part of it right.
Okay.
We should be aggressive at encouraging major companies that, all things being equal, have been taking advantage of more favorable tax climates, lower wage rates, less regulation in other jurisdictions, challenging them to bring their resources back and reinvest in the United States. Trump has done a number of things that will help that. One is something called full expensing. Now, if you build a plant, if you invest in a production line, if you invest, if you make capital investments, you're going to be able to write them off right away. Is that a tax break for corporations? No, because in a real sense, what you're doing is you're luring corporations and companies into investing in American jobs, and that's something that's one of the most significant changes, if not the biggest change, in the Republican tax bill this year. That is now a permanent feature in the tax code. But there's no one single thing that you build this around. I think that Donald Trump, by jawboning a lot of companies, has done the right thing, but not always the right way. And I also think that Trump recognized, and some of the people around Trump, particularly the Secretary of the Treasury, recognized that we needed to have a reset because the federal the global trading system had become tilted against the United States because we had been leading it for a long time and looking the other way on how some of our trading partners had essentially dictated for themselves advantages. I don't agree with the way Trump has approached Canada. I don't agree with the way Trump has approached a number of our other trading partners. I recognize, though, that China is ultimately China has to start abiding by the global rules that were laid out originally, or we have a problem.
Yeah.
And I think that going in the direction of not prodding the Chinese, but to move toward decoupling from the Chinese economy is a painful thing that had to happen. That said, that's not the way we have framed it to the public. and we haven't told them to expect pain. And as a result, people are concerned because they are concerned how some of these tariffs are going to impact on the products they use as consumers. Mm-hmm. That is legitimate to a point. It isn't always true that every tariff is going to drive up costs, because broad tariffs sometimes will depreciate the currency and end up leveling the trading field without necessarily driving up costs. It's complicated, and the jury is still out on what Trump is doing.
I've just got about 4 minutes left with former Congressman Phil English, and I want to get to two things before we're done here. And something that is obviously important to me. I've had a 40-plus year broadcast career, and I want to talk to you about the FCC entering into the conversation with free speech and what Commissioner Carr said about you could do it the easy way or the hard way when it came to ABC and Mr. Kimmel there. What are your thoughts?
My view is that Mr. Carr spoke very poorly. Yeah. And I agree with Senator Cruz on that. I think this has created a really bad precedent. I think it needs to be framed from this point forward as we need to have an objective set of rules. We need to recognize that people can say outrageous things, and some of them are going to be punished in the marketplace, not in restricting their access to platforms. I was not in favor of deplatforming Jimmy Kimmel. And apparently he's coming back. I think what Jimmy Kimmel said was stupid, appalling, and I don't watch Jimmy Kimmel, so I'm, advertisers are not going to lure me by anything they do on his program. But I think we need to have free speech, and I think that any appearance that an administration or a particular viewpoint is leaning forward to adjust the scales in their favor is a disaster.
Yeah. One last question, and let's have a little fun with this here. You were one of the few Republicans to win citywide office here in Erie, Pennsylvania. Tell us about the context of how you won, what the role was, and what were the circumstances of you winning?
The circumstances were it was an open seat for city controller. It opened at the last minute. 6 people ran. The guy who won was a veteran politician whose son is now a very good friend of mine and represents me in the State House. And he was controversial in Democratic circles, and I decided, if I'm ever going to, I went into it expecting to lose by a wide margin, my first race ever, and I just decided, we need to send a message to voters that they have a choice. So I quit my job. I knocked on 10,000 doors out of the city was larger then. It was about 33,000 households, I figured. We didn't have any of the technology that would allow us to see whose door we were knocking on or how often they voted. We just handed out flyers. I did not campaign based on my party. I just promised to do the job and offered some ideas.
Your dad was a part of the city at one point, right?
My dad, it's so kind of you to remember, he was actually city solicitor, and his my grandfather was a very famous city solicitor. Mm-hmm. And my dad ran for mayor when I was a little kid. I had a vague memory of that. My mother threatened Dad, don't you ever do that again after his second race. And so he wandered off and got a boat, and that's what we did during the summer. So the bottom line, I wanted to make a contribution. I did not expect to win, and I just went out and asked everyone for their vote for about 6 months. And good grief, I got 58% of the vote in a 21% Republican constituency.
Do you think that Republicans could win in the city again?
Yes, I do. But I think the challenge here is it's so much harder to talk past controversy. If you are running for something like city controller, I think that inherently it's easier to get people to vote for you as a watchdog. And you don't have to sound partisan. For city council, it shouldn't be all that partisan. And I think that shortly after I won, a Republican got elected to city council who is the last person to serve as a Republican in city government. My view is that John Persinger's campaign from 8 years ago demonstrated that even with a strong Democratic candidate, a Republican can make it competitive by talking about issues, by talking up to the neighborhoods, and by getting into every neighborhood and talking to people. What I found was that when I was knocking on those doors, people didn't care what my party was. They were just tickled to finally have someone show up and talk to them at their door. And some of that may have changed a little bit socially with COVID. And people, I think, aren't quite as welcoming as they once were. But I have to say, in knocking on something nearly 10,000 doors, wow. I probably only ran into about 15 households where I was greeted with hostility. People were just pleased to see me. Now, later when I was going door to door a little bit when I was in Congress, I'd get more people chewing on me. But, if you're in Congress, you're supposed to be chewed on. Right. So it's, it didn't bother me all that much.
Well, I think there's a lot to be said there about, maybe times are changing. I'm not sure this will be particularly the election that there'll be, any kind of major wave or whatever. But my feeling is that anybody puts their hat in the ring, they need to be honored and exalted, because it's a lot to raise your hand to say, I'm going to do public service. Yeah. And I thank you for your public service.
Well,
Phil
you're
English.
very kind to say that. And let me say, I think the burden is on both parties to offer full slates of candidates everywhere. This year, I'm glad to see in the city. I don't know some of them, but there are people running for most of the slots, and that's better than it's been in past years. The local Democrats have done a nice job out in the county of running people, and some good people, for county council and for some of the townships. So my view is that both parties need to be in the game and get people who from different walks of life, different backgrounds, different expertise to actually run for office. Joel, I have to tell you though, everywhere I go, talking to some of the people who are recruiting at the congressional level on down, it's hard to get people to run because it's just such the politics they see is so unpleasant.
Yeah, well, it is the politics of personal destruction. And we've been having that for a long time. Former Congressman Phil English, thank you so much for taking the time and your generosity.
My privilege.
You got it. It is coming up at 5 o'clock here. Talk Erie.